Okay, great. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Steven Amarnick, who is the man of the night or the afternoon in the US. And as I say, today marks the culmination of many years of work on this project, which saw the publication in 2015 of the folio edition, which I'm sure many of you have got, which is absolutely beautiful. So beautiful that, to be honest, I didn't read it because I tend to get coffee and chocolate biscuits on everything I read. And then later that was followed by the hardback edition in Everyman, which I did read, which is covered in coffee and biscuits. And I'm looking forward to rereading it in Oxford World's Classics. Steven, welcome. And can you talk to us a little bit about how this project began and how you became interested in the project?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for arranging for this event, and it's really an honor and pleasure. So I wrote a dissertation on Trollope, and which I finished in the late 90s, and at the same time, right when I finished the dissertation, I also curated an exhibit at NYU, New York University Library, at the Thales Rare Book Library about Trollope, and in both of those cases, my main interest or a huge interest I had was Trollope's subtlety. I just always felt that he was a much more subtle writer than he was usually given credit for. And I think the reason for that is, a big reason for that is he's so easy to read and he can be read so quickly, and people do read him quickly. And that's great. I mean, he wanted to be read quickly if that's what people wanted. But I think that if you go back and comb through his sentences, there is a lot going on. In particular, as I did in both the exhibit and the dissertation, I really combed through the autobiography in particular. So it's well known that the manuscript of The Duke's Children was at Yale University, at the Beinecke Library, which is an incredible place to work, by the way. I mean, just spectacular. So some things had been written about it, but not that much. And I just knew that if I studied the manuscript, I would find all kinds of subtle things, and maybe some big things too, but I was really looking for subtle things. And then, as I live, close to New Haven in Manhattan, so it's an easy train ride up. I could do day trips. As I kept going back and I went page by page, on every page, I found this, I found that, and I said, oh, wow, too bad that was lost, too bad. And it just there's 1,000 pages of manuscript, more than 1,000 pages, and I'm finding all kinds of things on every page. And it's like, oh, this really should be published. And then I thought, well, actually it could be, it would be work, but it could be. And then, we took it from there. I took it from there. And yeah. And yeah, just to continue that. So in 2003, I made a presentation, a speech at the Trollope Society in New York. And that led to the next spring, I did a seminar with 3 sessions where we went through some of the major cuts. At the end of that, Bob came up to me and said, I'd like to help you if you want to do this. I always forget, Bob. Is it Karen who came up to me and said, Bob would like to do this, or did you?
I believe that we approached you in force,
okay,
as a group.
Okay. All right, so you were not volunteered for this. Okay. Anyhow, and then we started working on it. And then in 2006 in Exeter, there was a conference on Trollope. And I gave a talk there, and a lot of people were really interested in having, me continuing this project. At that point, Susan Humphreys, who's a book publisher in Arizona, she was at the conference. She said she would like to help. And so, and then she was able to join us, off and on for the coming years. She's in Arizona, we're in New York in pre-Zoom days, so it probably work a little differently. but you know, Bob and I met constantly. Susan would come in twice a year, and we'd have these so-called summit meetings where we'd go over what we were doing. And then ultimately we knew there was a deadline in terms of 2015. We really wanted to get it out in terms of the bicentenary. And Susan had approached Michael at the Trollope Society, Michael Williamson, who will speak in a few minutes. And he ultimately got us to talk to Joe Whitlock Blundell at the Folio Society, who really believed in the project. And so we published it in 2015.
And once for you who haven't read the longer version, how is the longer book better than its original, and how did the original suffer by the cuts?
Well, I think the basic answer to that is character. Trollope is one of the great masters of characterization in the English novel, and really I would say every single character suffers because of the loss of details. From the beginning, I've always felt that the main difference is Silverbridge, who comes off as a little stiff and just not a rich character in the cut version. But I think in the full version, it's a huge difference. And I think the reason is that Trollope started The Duke's Children just a few weeks after he finished an autobiography. And in that book, you may remember the opening chapters, they're all about how woeful he was and his life was. Everything, just one thing after another, and he couldn't get anything going. And then suddenly there's a chapter, then I got to Ireland and everything changed. Well, that's not how things work in real life. You don't just flip a switch and suddenly, you're successful when you've been totally hapless beforehand. But he did not want to go through the details in the autobiography about how he slowly transformed into somebody who was ready to be successful. And in fact, he says in there that he threw out journals from his youth that he had consulted in recent years, but he didn't want people to see them. So I think that that The Duke's Children is, the greatest achievement is the growth of Silverbridge from a really hapless youth to somebody who by the end has matured tremendously and will continue to mature to the point where, I know some people are gonna scream at this, but I put this in the introduction and I believe it. I actually think that give him another 20 years, he could be prime minister and a better prime minister than his father. He has everything going for him. Personality, nature, a wife who will help him rather than hinder him, as we know that with the Duke and Glencora. So, and you can just go right down the line in terms of characters. The other brief thing I would say is tone. Trollope was really at his best. He was really able to just switch tones so beautifully from serious to funny back to more serious. And a lot of those touches got lost in the cuts. So that, so restoring those touches, you really see, well, when I spoke a few years ago at the banquet, I talked about the movie Mr. Turner by Mike Leigh, and the moment where Turner does a little dab of paint to change the painting. Trollope didn't do that sort of thing, but he didn't go back and do the dabs of painting. What he did, though, was he had internalized what he needed to do. So he was able to get as much as possible everything there the first time. And so when he took things out a few years later, he did tremendous damage to just the little touches that add up to a great work of art.
Absolutely, and it's over the last few weeks, people will know we've been running the campaign Pick Up a Trollope, and Julian Fellows, the president of the Trollope Society, has chosen the Duke's Children as his sort of candidate for the Pick Up a Trollope read, but he's specified it's the longer restored version, and in fact we delayed the whole promotion in order to coincide with this with today, so people are able to now purchase it. Anyway, so when you're working on the manuscript, what were the editorial challenges that you faced with this 1,000-page manuscript?
Okay. First off, Trollope's handwriting is, at this stage of his life, is really, really abysmal. And I have a page plan that maybe we can look at later that I'll show on the screen, just to give you a demonstration of that. Then you have his bad handwriting with lines all through things, so that's a problem. And then, there are all kinds of editorial issues. When he was writing, he would cross things out with a wavy line as he was writing if he didn't want it. But the next day when he went to proofread, he wouldn't necessarily use that wavy line anymore. He would use a straight line. Well, the straight lines are what he used when he cut the book 2 years after he first wrote it. So we had to figure out, when there was a straight line cut, was it a cut that he made to save space, or was it more just in that case, an editorial cut? So there are all kinds of judgment decisions on that. There's also once we figured out the manuscript, what we thought was in the manuscript, then collating that with the first edition of the novel that Chapman and Hall published, because all kinds of changes occur between manuscript and publication. And we looked at all the year round before that too, but we mainly focused on Chapman and Hall. So if there was a change in Chapman and Hall that was not marked on the manuscript, was that a change because it was a response to some of the cuts and Trollope or whoever saw it and said, that doesn't look right, so let's change more? Or was it something that he would have done anyhow when he was looking at a book in proofs? So, there's that. There's so much. There were editorial decisions in terms of punctuation. What punctuation are we going to use and why? And ultimately, we did something that is very unusual and maybe unprecedented, I don't know, which is we used Trollope's manuscript punctuation for dialogue, and we use Chapman and Hall's punctuation for narration. So those are just some of the things. There's more. And in fact, in my notes that I've published now, I document all the many, many, many decisions that we had to make.
And that website's now available.
Yes. So first of all, so the notes are going to be on this website, and also still at the Trollope Societies, because I've been putting them up over the years, and you have been so kind to put them up, and they will stay there. So they'll be in both places. But yeah, I've since the 2015, since the book came out from the Folio Society, I've been working on these notes. And of course, I didn't expect it to take 5 years, but everything with this project has taken longer than I ever would have expected. Let me see if I could just, like, 1 second. Oh, no. Okay. Anyhow, I can pull that up later if people want to see what it looks like. But it's Duke's Children complete. Whoops. No, that's okay. Sorry. I just shared my email with you for a second, but anyhow, it's dukechildrencomplete.com.
Great.
It has the complete manuscript cuts, like every single cut that is in the manuscript is up there. I have notes on over 1,000 restored passages and what kind of difference they make. I have the editorial policies up there. I have the introduction from the folio edition. And I think most importantly, I have the editorial decisions where I explain chapter by chapter, page by page, the editorial decisions that I had to make.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, Bob, can I bring you in here? And during this epic undertaking, what was your role and in the project from the beginning?
Well, basically, Steve, of course, Steve had a number of general conceptions about what the edited version would be like, and there was no question from the beginning that he was going to make as the brains of the project, that he was going to make all the final decisions about editing, but. I was very flattered to be at the role he gave me. We did discuss the issues, editing principles, and so forth, and we worked on, as Steve points out, the punctuation, treatment of the punctuation, which is I realize very unusual, but I think that we can clearly. We can clearly justify it on the same basis, which is authorial intention. He wanted his punctuation to be followed in the dialogue because he paid acute attention to that. We feel that in a sense he heard his characters talking inside his head, and he knew exactly the intonations that they used, emphases, and so forth. And with the narrative, he would often go on for lines and lines and lines without any punctuation marks. He expected the printers to take care of that, to as it were, kind of socialize or civilize his punctuation. So I think that those were two, in Trollope's mind and in his practice, those were two different situations that required two different treatments. Anyway, as I say, Steve was really welcoming to my suggestions, but basically we did the same thing. We both went through the same process. As I remember, he did the original transcription for more than half of the book, and I did more than half the collation, which also was quite important on, determining what his final intentions were. But so up to that point, and then we discussed all the doubtful readings and points together. But after the original publication of the book, I must say that I more or less dropped out. I sort of felt that I had contributed what I signed on for and more, perhaps. And then Steve took over, and he has done the website, which was a monstrous amount of work entirely by himself.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I couldn't share that now. No. Oh gosh, forget what. This share screen in Zoom is so annoying. Hold on. Okay, now. All right. Here we go. So here's the website. So the main part is the notes. So you can click for all these things over here. And then, eventually I'm going to put up a number of manuscript pages and comment on them and talk about some of the things we see on those manuscript pages. And I also, well, here are some articles about the book that came out in 2015. And here, I have contact. So if people have questions, you can reach me very, very easily.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'm just going to come to Michael and ask again about your participation. But first of all, I must say, I remember when you raised this, and I have to apologize to Stephen, but I wasn't an immediate enthusiast. So Michael had to kind of persuade people in the Trollope Society as well. So Michael, do tell us about your involvement.
So Dom, I just have to say, I know that that's true because when I spoke at the Trollope Society annual lecture in 2014, you were sitting there and you had a very skeptical look on your face.
Well, I'm a convert now.
Mute, you're muted.
Okay, I'm okay now, yes?
Yes.
Just to say, I mean, I think Steven has made it clear how long this project has taken. And it really has taken a very long time, and that reflects very much the amount of work that has been necessary to do this. And I first became involved when I was contacted years and years and years ago, it seems now, by Susan Humphreys, who was really, and had been trying for a year or two, I think, trying to find a publisher that would show interest in this project. She had written off, she hadn't really got anywhere, and I think she had a vague idea that we might be interested in publishing it within the society, but certainly she wanted the backing of the society for anything else that she did. I was really excited because obviously I knew about the manuscript. My general idea about it was appalling to read it. I knew that several Trollopian scholars had consulted it and some had quoted from it in their biographies, but that nobody had felt able to actually produce the entire version in a readable form. So the fact that somebody apparently had, and it was all ready for publication, was a wonderful thing, you know, and I became very enthusiastic. So first of all, for about a year and a half, I think, we approached 2 further publishers and I sent a supporting letter with it. And I think by the response that we got, I realized that no major publisher who was actually already publishing the existing novel was necessarily going to be enthused about changing something which was already bringing them in regular money, and all they were having to do was to reprint it every so often, possibly with a new editor, to actually completely start from scratch again and produce something I think many people felt was going to be too much for them. So in that case, that was the time that I thought about Joe Whitlock Blundell, who really was the turning pin of this whole thing. Because Joe had helped us with the Trollope Society when we were doing our uniform edition. We worked with the Folio Society in the uniform edition of the first complete uniform volumes of all of Trollope's work. And he had been very enthusiastic. And going to see him, you know, I found an enthusiasm that matched my own, and that was a very big change, and something that had not really been apparent in any of the other approaches to publishers. So immediately he was enthusiastic, immediately he was ready to publish, and we were hoping, of course, for it to hit the bicentenary, and that wasn't that far away at that point. And all of a sudden, everything was coming up roses. I then discovered that Susan had not exactly been all that truthful in what she had passed on to me, and that actually the work on the manuscript had not quite finished, I think I'm right in saying, which meant that Steven then had an even worse task in hurrying to actually get it finished in time for the bicentenary. But of course he did it. He together with Bob and Susan, made a magnificent job of it. And it really was one of the highlights of the bicentenary, and of course both Bob and Steven came over and joined us on that occasion. And I think once that had happened, I should also add at this point that of course copyright was necessary, because although Anthony Trollope is generally speaking out of copyright, the unpublished material that was being used actually was still in the hands of the Trollope family. And it was greatly to the generosity and kindness of the Trollope family in Australia, and Hugh, of course, is one of our current vice presidents, that they transferred the copyright to the Trollope Society, and the understanding that as a charity, you know, we would try to do the best we could to produce something that would be readable and accessible as quickly as possible. And I think this was Stephen's main objective as well. So that was all very positive. And once the reviews came out and everybody was talking about it as the new thing, then publishers began to change their mind. And it was at that point that we were actually approached, first of all, by Everyman, as we've heard. They were interested, obviously, Folio were just interested in the 2 fine editions, and it was a limited edition, of course, as well. Everyman produced the hardback version. And unfortunately, as many of you know, if you're going to any bookshop, you see a whole bookcase of Everyman editions. And this book, in fact, although it has the only complete edition on the front, you would not know it was any different to the old edition, really, compared with the old edition that they had. So that made a bit of a difference, and I know a lot of people managed to get hold of that copy. And then at the same time, we also were approached by Naxos Audio Books, who wanted to do an audio version, which they did, and that is really a magnificent version for anybody that would prefer that sort of thing. And all of this interest slowly began to peter through to the major publishers, and I think it was a result of that. And it's easy to say it all very quickly, but this was taking years, really. It was after that that we then began to get the warm feelings from the Oxford University Press, who, by deciding to produce the the publication that is now available from today, they have replaced their old edition by this, which is virtually making sure that this now becomes the definitive edition and will be used by all scholars in the future. So it's really been a great success story. And I would have to say, relatively unbiased, that the quality of this book now, with all of the preliminaries and subsidiaries that are associated with it, and Stephen really has done a wonderful introduction to it. This, I think, in the future will be one of the best choices for both academics and Trollope enthusiasts as well. So I would urge you all to get copies of it. And the special arrangement through Pickup at Trollope, I think, is going to give discount to everybody, which is really good. And it fulfills our really obligation to make sure that the work is available to as many people as possible and in as many different ways as possible. So yes.
Well, I have to, you've been too modest here, so I have to pipe in. So the Oxford edition has a new chronology of Trollope's life and career that Michael did, that is, I think is spectacular, because Michael, you showed how when things were first written and when they was published in serial and when they were published in first edition, and it's so readable and so easy to use. So I mean that is just a tremendous accomplishment. And also you did the name index at the end, which is very useful too. So thank you for being part.
You're very welcome. They were very small contributions to a magnificent whole.
Chronology is really quite something. It's really, really useful.
Thank you. And just to show you, this is what Michael was talking about. That's the Naxos.
Oh, the Naxos. Yes, of course. Yes.
It's lots and lots of CDs, but I think it's available on Audible as well. So and we had a question earlier today about the ebook rights. Will it be available as an ebook?
Some of that is with Oxford University Press now, but
right.
we have certainly the audio rights are available to anybody who actually asks for them. Naxos is not exclusive. But there are now more, more complications with Oxford University Press coming in.
Super. Okay. Well, let's have a look to see if we've got the questions coming in on chat. I think we might have covered them, but you might want to explore them further. So Stephen, Mika's asking, does the book have a black line so we can see the changes that were made? I'm assuming not due to aesthetics. So that all those changes, that's available on your website, is it not?
So, well, on the website, I actually show the complete cuts. I mean, every single one, and I hope I caught everything. I think I did. But that's in a Word document. I mean, in terms of the manuscript, maybe this is a good time to show a page now, to show what it looks like. Okay, so I am going to do that. Okay. All right, so. Oh, okay. All right. You see that now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, you know, the manuscript is at Yale's Beinecke Library. In order to see things really clearly, I had to go there in person. Certain things, but they did also make up a copy of the whole manuscript that I could take home and work with from home. Without that, it really would have been impossible to do, because it would have been too many hours of having to go to the library, and it would not have been possible, actually. So I mean, you can see what it looks like, and I mean, you can see right off the bat, like, so this is chapter 73. I have never loved you. So you see Trollope's handwriting. So this is the word have, and it looks more like HUUR. I don't know. And this is the word never, which looks like NI. He didn't often dot his I's. This looks more like an A. This is another I. I don't know what this is here. I mean, you see the handwriting problems. And then the straight lines are almost always because he was cutting for space. So you see that. But then also the wavy lines, and let's see if this works. Yeah, so like over there, that sort of wavy line, that would be something that when he was first writing the book in 1876, as he was writing, he crossed something out quickly and then keep going. So, those kinds of wavy lines, I think maybe there were one or two exceptions. We could always say those were just changes he was making as he was writing. But so you have the straight lines, you have the wavy lines, and then you have to also figure out like what's going on. So up here, he squeezed the word now in to replace the cut at the beginning of the paragraph. So that's pretty clear cut. But there are many other occasions in the book where he put stuff in and it's not absolutely clear cut. Did it replace an earlier cut, or was it something that he inserted anyhow to try to make the sentence better? You see here, over here, he put the word and in. That's also squeezed in. So that, well, both of this, the now and the and, are replacing the cuts. Down here, you see another wavy line. And so that's just a regular change he made as he was writing. Here again is a wavy line. All of this down here, straight lines. Okay, my drawing got a little off there. So those are cuts. Those were space-saving cuts. When he inserted something with a caret over here, very often it was to replace something that had been cut. But again, sometimes he tended to do that when he would proofread the next day. If you remember from his autobiography, he says that he woke up at 5, and then at 5:30 he would start work, but the first half hour he would reread what he had done the day before. So those would be cases where he might have inserted something. So figuring out, was that a regular editing change, or was it in response to the cut? So that's a little bit of what the manuscript looks like. And again, I'm going to I'm going to be posting more pages and then explaining some of the interesting things and decisions that had to be made regarding those pages.
And we've got a question from Neil. What was the or can you identify what was the hardest change or addition that you had to make? And I know that you have agonized over them. Can you give us some examples of those difficult choices?
I mean, really the absolutely biggest difficult thing was the punctuation. It really was. I mean, we certainly didn't want to just, do whatever we felt like. We felt we had to have principles. And there were problems with every single approach that we thought of. And even with, okay, so we decided we're going to use Trollope's punctuation for the dialogue and Chapman and Hall's punctuation for the narration. We did not want to use all the year round because they changed the punctuation entirely. For instance, Trollope has these comma dashes and semicolon dashes. All the year round just changed them to plain dashes. I feel very strongly that that's so much is lost in the flavor of Trollope's writing when you get rid of those semicolon dashes and comma dashes. So there was that, but then, so what do you do though? I mean, my principle was, okay, we'll use Trollope's punctuation for dialogue as long as it's feasible. So there are always questions in some cases, is this feasible? Or is it too idiosyncratic, too distracting? Trollope, there's a number of cases where he put in question marks, and Chapman and Hall and all the year round turned them into periods or exclamation points. Which cases did we go back to the manuscript and say, no, we're going to put this back in as a question mark? And which cases would we say, okay, it's unlikely that he did really want a question mark here, and either he changed it in proofs or somebody changed it, or they had second thoughts. I mean, so the difficulties in terms of what to do about the punctuation, those even after we made the decision about which ones to follow, those were tremendous headaches.
And do we know, other than the obvious, it was very long, why Charles Dickens' son required the cuts to be made?
Well, there's a certain amount of mystery about that. I think that I mean, it's unthinkable that Trollope just walked in and said, "Yeah, I really want to cut the Duke's children." But he was at a very vulnerable moment in his career. The prime minister had just come out while he was writing, and he thought it was one of the best books he ever wrote. And actually, I think many of us would agree, but that's not what the critics said, not what the public said. It was just a disaster. His price, how much he was able to get for his books had gone down considerably. So he was at a very, very vulnerable point. So, I mean, whether Dickens absolutely demanded it or whether Dickens suggested it and Trollope didn't put up a big fight, that's murky. What's not murky is that Trollope never cut anything like this in his life. In the autobiography, he talks about an editor asking him to cut Barchester Towers, and he's indignant. How am I supposed to cut two words out of every 6? And he had just written that book, right? A couple of years before he cut The Duke's Children. And then I think most importantly, he wrote a letter in 1878 to Blackwood, who was publishing John Caldergate at the time, who was serializing that. And Trollope thought that he was being asked to cut some of the later chapters, and he wrote, if you want me to do this, I will. It will break my heart, but I'll do it if you insist. And then he also says, However, if I do make the cuts, we have to keep the manuscript clear so that, or produce a clear copy of it so that when the book is published by Chapman and Hall, it will be published in its complete version. So he clearly learned his lesson. He learned that he should not have made the manuscript changes, the changes to the book on the manuscript, because it would have taken him, it wouldn't have taken him as long as it took me to do this project, but it would have taken him a lot longer than he would have wanted. And so but he was not going to ever let something like this happen again.
So you don't think there's another Trollope waiting for you to restore it? Things you're at a loose end now.
Well, who knows? You know, no, look, no, probably not. However, I do often wonder if he had lived another 10 years and was still able to write, if he would have gone back to the Pallisers and done another version of this book. And you know, I think again, I think Silverbridge as Prime Minister makes a lot of sense to me. And again, I ask everybody to read the full book now, and don't judge him by the way he is when it starts. He grows. But I also, you know, maybe the Duke 20 years later in his 70s falls in love again. I also, I mean, some people have said, oh, maybe he'll fall in love with Mabel. He likes Mabel. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I like that idea, but I would love to see Mabel have a happier ending than the one she seemingly gets in The Duke's Children, because, you know, Trollope got caught up on, you know, if a woman falls in love and then it doesn't work out, then she could never love again. And I like to think that he would rethink that, and maybe, and I said this in the introduction, the Oxford introduction, maybe Mabel would marry somebody, you know, the least awful person she could imagine, because she does have to get married in order to survive, basically. And then, you know, slowly she would realize, hey, I like him. And then slowly she would like actually fall in love with him. I mean, I think that would be very satisfying, and it would be a little less punitive, perhaps.
Just continue, we've got quite a few questions coming in basically on sort of availability of editions. So I just want to clear that up. My understanding is that it is going to be published in paperback by OUP, available in the States in January.
Yes, right at the beginning.
You can get international deliveries from Amazon.co.uk. WH Smith's won't. I think they only have permission to sell it in the UK at the moment, so you can't order internationally from WH Smith's. I think I've certainly successfully ordered it from WH Smith's, and the good news is that because it's half price, this perhaps isn't good news for Stephen, but it's currently half price on WH Smith, so £6.49. And if you take advantage of the WH Smith's offer, if you buy any Trollope books, if you buy Barchester Towers, which is £8.99, you get the Duke's Children for £3.49. It doesn't. It seems incredible. So do hurry across to WH Smith's.
I'm so happy to have people read the book that.
I think someone's had
just give it away altogether. I don't care.
It's wonderful. I mean, to get a Oxford World's Classics for £3.49 is truly fantastic. And that's, you know, because, you know, WH Smith's and Oxford University Press have been, you know, beyond supportive in helping the Trollope Society make them available. I think.
Oh no! I just maybe a good place to say that one thing I know maybe this is shallow, but one thing that I really love about this Oxford book is the cover. I think I really love the cover. I mean, it's so it has the spirit. It expresses the spirit of the book. What I think the spirit, which is forward thinking and optimistic, and looking toward a new world where the aristocracy is kind of refreshed by the encounter with Isabel, and Silverbridge and Gerald are kind of new men, as opposed to somebody like Frank, who has a much more rigid notion of masculinity. And so there's a great scene in the book where Isabel and Silverbridge are playing tennis, and lawn tennis was very new at the time. And they're flirting like crazy with each other, and Mabel is sitting there watching. And it's really a wonderful scene. And so I love the idea of this image of a woman playing tennis. And
yeah, it's a beautiful cover. Just a couple of other questions coming in from Gillian. How did the revised version, including the cut, significantly? How much, sorry, did the revised version, including the cut, significantly affect the novel, not just the individual characters, as you indicated? Does it take the book in a different direction or create a new understanding of what he was trying to achieve in the novel?
Well, he did not cut any chapters out of the book. He did not cut any characters out of the book. He did not cut any plot lines out of the book. So the basic book is still the same. So it's the details. I should say here, Trollope did an extraordinary job cutting the book. I don't really even know how he did it. I mean, it's really, the Duke's Children, as we've known it until now, is still a good book. If it had been a disaster, then we wouldn't be here right now, because somebody would have reconstructed this book 60 years ago. It's really, he did as good a job as you can imagine for somebody who was not willing to rethink the whole book, and who was only going to cut word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, but not the basic structure.
And just thinking about kind of the way books were published in the Victorian period, it was serialized first, but we've got a question from Colin that's saying, was it not simply a case of cutting the book to fit into the standard 3 volumes of many Victorian novels? Many library members paid for 3 subscriptions so you could borrow 3 books at once. 4 volumes would have blown the system. Was it unusual in its time to have been in 4 volumes?
No, by the time that I don't think Trollope, the book was originally conceived to be 4 volumes, but by the time the book was actually going to be published, because the Prime Minister in 4 volumes was such a disaster in terms of sales in particular, and also reviews. I don't think there was any way that it was going to be 4 volumes. It would have been 4 volumes at 20 chapters each. I think that it would have still been 3 volumes, just three. I actually have the first edition here, so they would have just been fatter volumes. And some of Trollope's books, and this is in Michael's chronology, where it mentions how many volumes each book was in. I mean, some of Trollope's books that were even longer than The Duke's Children were published in 3, and I think there's a few that are even in 2 volumes. So I don't know what those would look like, 2 fat volumes. So yeah.
And we had a question about the about your process of sort of putting together the new manuscript. How did you do that with the original manuscript and the first edition? Did you then type it into Word? How did we end up with the document, with the file that then got published?
Yeah, typed into Word. Yeah, exactly. I don't know, Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes. Well, actually, we did actually get an ebook, I believe, from Gutenberg, to just as a framework to start on. But we went through that very carefully, and changed what we were sure were misreadings. So we came out with the original book. That is when Trollope put it away in the drawer 2 years before it was published. That is what we started from. But you know, it was truly an agonizing process. I mean, really, there were so many things that we had doubts about the readings, and we did do a full collation, as we mentioned before. We collated with both All Year Round serial version and the Chapman and Hall. So, you know, just looking at the collation, you know, it usually was fairly obvious, you know, what his intentions were. He didn't change much in proof, but those changes which we sure were made in proof, you know, of course, we incorporated in our version. The main problem was getting the readings correct. You saw this scribbling that Steve put up. It was, you know, the A's, O's, E's. I mean, there really was not that much difference. We kind of, this sounds strange and illogical, but actually we often could not associate a word with what we saw in the manuscript until we had figured out what that word must have been. And then we could go back and see that the marks did bear some kind of relationship to but there were particularly late, you know, we kept changing. There were a few things, a few issues of readings where we kept changing our mind over the editions. And the Oxford World's Classics edition actually has a slightly different, and we think improved text. Steve and I really wrestled over these, you know, because we had a slightly different orientation. Steve really was not going to let anything through that he couldn't clearly see in the manuscript. And I took more of the approach that you know, we knew how much Trollope cared about smoothness and you know, not putting in potholes to trip the reader. So I was much more influenced by this does not read, this reads so awkwardly. I cannot believe that Trollope really wrote that. And there are a couple of things that I can remember that were only changed for the Oxford, the new edition, that I had to do a huge amount of searching to find other examples of him forming letters in this very deceptive way, you know, so that Steve could accept. He was our collective conscience about the manuscript, but he finally did. He was forced to agree with me that there were places where Trollope made these letters in such a way that it would give a terrible. It was just it was really almost like a booby trap for the printers. One of the cases that really delighted me was that there is a citation of the verb coy, to coy, in other words, to dissemble, which was a favorite word of his. What he intended to write was about Mabel and Silverbridge. She had coyed her love, and for all the world, what he must have meant is her looked like his, and that's been the reading ever since the first publication of the book. Well, the Oxford English Dictionary cited that passage in the Duke's Children, and that was the only citation for that meaning of coy, because it was reversed from what it used to be. And I'm so delighted to get rid of that, because you know, that is a red herring in the Oxford English Dictionary. But that just gives you an example of how hard it was. I mean, there's really a huge amount of thinking and searching and arguing that went into some of these decisions. But I certainly don't want to give the impression that it was not worth it. It most certainly was worth it. It's a fine book, and we think it's one of his best.
Thank you. That's a lovely example. Thank you. What I'm going to do is
could I just add something? Yeah. So yeah, one thing I do think was an advantage about this project taking so many years was that sometimes we talk about something in 2006, and then in 2010 we looked at it again, and with fresh eyes and with new experience, and it was possible to see different alternatives. So I do, in compiling my notes the last 5 years for the website, I have gone over the original text, the manuscript, and all the year round, and at Chapman and Hall a number of times more, and I am very delighted to say that we had it 99% right in folio. And then there were, a few things that I ended up changing for Everyman, and then a few more things for Oxford. But I do feel like the text now is very tight. I mean, it doesn't mean that somebody maybe somebody will feel like they'll look at the manuscript, especially when I put parts online, and say, you did this. What about that? Who knows? There are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of details, but I feel really great about how long this took, and how looking at things with fresh eyes again and again over the years made a difference.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.